Hey everyone, for today's Bible lesson for our Grace Vocation Bible School this summer, we are at Main Street Park here in Coopersville, and you can see the creek behind me. Today we're talking about Psalm 23 verse 2, specifically where it says, "He leads me beside still waters." Now water is really important to everyone's life, to us humans and animals, like sheep friend. We need water to survive. But water can be kind of scary too. If there's a lot of it, if it gets moving really fast, oh yeah, sheep friend's scared. And you know what? It wasn't long ago, we got a lot of water here in Coopersville, and where I'm at right now, this was all flooded, if you can believe it. In fact, this whole park gets covered in water sometimes when we get enough rain, when we get enough water. It gets pretty crazy, and it can actually be kind of dangerous. If you're not careful, you could get swept away. And you know what? Sheep friend here is not a very good swimmer, and he would definitely get swept away. But our good shepherd leads us beside quiet waters. A good shepherd protects their sheep, brings them to water that they need, that's calm and quiet. They can get a drink, they can get their fill, they can get the water they need without being in danger. You know, a sheep may not realize that there is some water that can be dangerous. And sometimes we don't always realize the danger that we can be in. But Jesus protects us from it. Jesus doesn't bring us to situations where we're going to be in a lot of danger. He doesn't bring us into situations where He's not in control. God is always in control, and Jesus, our good shepherd, is always there for us and always protecting us. Sometimes life can seem kind of out of control. It can seem kind of dangerous, but Jesus is always there protecting us. You know, this year we've gone through some pretty crazy times, haven't we? And that can seem like life is out of control. And it might have seemed at times that life was out of control. But Jesus was always there with you. And He always brings us to where we need to be. He always protects us and gives us exactly what we need, even when we don't realize the danger or don't realize exactly what we need. Jesus is always there for us. And He brings us through the difficult times of life, protects us from the most crazy times, and the times when the waters of life are the most dangerous. Jesus brings us through the storms. I hope you remember how much Jesus loves you, and that He's always there for you, protecting you, giving you what you need, quiet, calm waters, and protecting you from the worst storms of life. And the best part, He died on the cross to forgive us of our sins and to give us a wonderful eternal life with Him in heaven. All right, will you guys pray with me? We want to pray, sheep friend? Okay. Dear Jesus, thank You for loving us. Thank You for providing for us and leading us beside quiet waters. Help us to know that You are always with us in the storms of life, protecting us from the worst of it. We love You. Amen. All right, enjoy your sessions for today, guys, and have a great day.
Looking out, it's a great big world. Where do I go? How do I fit in? Gotta keep this one thing on my mind. The maker of all the universe is on my side. And if God is for me, who can be against me? God is for me, who can be against me? He is my strength, He is my friend forever. God is for me, who can be against me? Never. God is for me. Looking out, it's a great big world. Where do I go? How do I fit in? Gotta keep this one thing on my mind. The maker of all the universe is on my side. And if God is for me, who can be against me? God is for me, who can be against me? He is my strength, He is my friend forever. God is for me, who can be against me? When I just don't understand, God is for me. When life doesn't go the way I planned, God is for me. When I just don't understand, God is for me. When life doesn't go the way I planned, God is for me. If God is for me, who can be against me? God is for me, who can be against me? He is my strength, He is my friend forever. God is for me, who can be against me? God is for me, who can be against me?
Hi, my name is Tara Weise. Welcome to sewing class. Today we're going to learn how to sew one of 3 different projects. You will have signed up for one of them. If you enjoy doing that, you can do all 3. Our choices today include a backpack pin, We have this pattern and some others in the handouts, or you can choose to create your own. Or a superhero cuff. The other project is a stuffed animal. We have patterns for a bear, a dolphin, or a snake. You can choose to use one of these or make your own. Now, I got all of these projects, and there are many others in this book called Sewing School by Amy Petronas Plumley and Andrea Lisley. This book is full of great ideas just for kids for learning how to sew. I hope you enjoy this class. We're going to start with a few different basic techniques that you need to learn in order to do any of these projects and any other kinds of sewing projects you might want to do. We're going to start with how to choose fabric, learning how to thread a needle, how to sew on a button, and how to do a few basic stitches. Thanks for joining me. Our first mini lesson is going to be how to choose fabric for your project. There's a lot of fabric choices out there. There's fun things like fleece, like your pajamas might be made of, or you might have a fleece blanket. This used to be pajamas. This is an old t-shirt. It's kind of worn out. This one will be good for a lot of the projects. This particular t-shirt is not very stretchy. And the great thing about t-shirt material is that it doesn't fray on the edges. So these two are great choices because they don't fray on the edges for your projects. Another great choice is craft felt. You can buy this in the fabric store or a craft store, and you probably have made things with this. This also does not pull on the edges. So when I talk about a fabric that frays on the edge, I mean something like this. This is a nice flannel fabric, but if you look at the edges, you can see that they're kind of pulling apart. And if I try to sew this near the edge, what's going to happen is it'll pull out and my project will fall apart. And so we don't want to use a fabric that can pull out on the edges and ruin our project. So this one is not a good choice for these kinds of projects, although it's great for something else. And this one too is a quilting cotton that also, for these kinds of projects, if you stitch too near the edge, it can pull out and your project just won't be as nice. A couple sources for projects then, or for fabrics, if you don't have a fabric stash, you can look at old clothes with an adult's permission, something maybe that doesn't fit you or has been ruined with holes. This one used to be pajamas, but now we've outgrown it and they had holes in the feet. This too used to be a really nice t-shirt, but again, it's past its prime. But it's perfect for a project like this. Now again, there's some fabrics that fray on the edges. Button-down shirts, for example, probably won't be a great choice. Another kind of fabric that won't be a great choice is a t-shirt that is very stretchy. This shirt stretches a lot. So it's not going to be as great for these projects because when you stuff things into them or try and do stuff with them, it'll stretch out of shape and your project won't look as nice. This t-shirt is not stretchy. So you kind of want to look for that if you're looking for fabrics, something that's not as stretchy like this one and doesn't fray like this one. And here's another old fabric choice. This is a pair of jeans that has holes in them. So this one would be not too bad, but jeans do kind of fray on the edge, so I would recommend not using jeans for these projects either. In this little mini lesson, we're going to learn how to thread a needle. So, the very most important thing you need to know about a needle is that because they are sharp, You need to always know where your needle is. If you're not using it, you need to have it pushed into a fabric or somewhere safe, because if you drop this, you do not want to find it 2 days later with your feet. That will hurt. So when you thread a needle, you take it out of your safe place and you start with getting a good amount of thread. Now, a pretty good amount is usually about as long as your arm. You do not want to go longer than that. It gets to be too hard to work with. If you run out while you're sewing, you can always tie a knot and start it again. So I have a piece here that's a pretty good length, and I'm going to cut the end. This particular kind of thread is called a craft thread. It's pretty thick and it kind of looks similar to embroidery thread, but it's easy to sew with, easy to see, and it's nice and strong, and it comes in lots of fun colors. This needle is called a chenille needle. It has a nice big head that is pretty easy to get your thread into, and because we're sewing with fabric, it has a sharp-ish point to get through the fabric. Other kinds of needles that are similar to this, like an embroidery needle, also have a big head, but their end might be dull so that it can fit through the holes in embroidery. That'd be a really frustrating kind of needle to use for sewing. So you want a needle with a point if you're sewing through fabric, and you want to make sure that the eye of the needle is bigger than the thread that you're trying to use. So again, this is craft thread, but you can use regular thread. You could even use a skinny string if you have a needle that's big enough. Kind of all depends on what's available to you. Now, so I'm going to show 2 different ways to thread this needle. So this little needle threader is called a low ran. And if you have one of these, here's how this works. You put your needle over it like this and kind of hang it on this little hooky space. Then you take your thread and you loop your thread into the hook. So you have kind of an arrangement that looks like this. And then you pull your needle over the end and you have your thread on and you're ready to go. So that's very convenient, but if you don't have that, then you can take this end here, and this end is the end I just cut. It's usually an easier end to work with. And I usually kind of lick it to make it damp and flat. It just helps an awful lot with getting it into the needle. And then you poke it into the needle end. And there you go, like that. So we have our needle threaded, and now we're going to want to tie a knot at the other end. And this is kind of like what you do to tie your shoes. You just put one side over and poke it through and pull it tight, just like that. And now you are ready to start sewing. And we'll talk about why we need this knot in the next video. In this lesson, we're going to go over a couple basic stitches. You will have your thread that you learned how to thread onto your needle in the last lesson, and you tied a knot on the end so that when you start stitching, the thread doesn't just pull right on through your fabric. So we're going to do the whip stitch and the running stitch. This first one is the whip stitch. You take your 2 pieces of fabric and you put them next to each other where you want them to be. So when you're sewing 2 pieces of fabric together, it's nice to have some pins or clips to hold them together so that they don't move away from each other and then you start sewing wrong. For this, I'd like to use safety pins. You can stick them in and shut them so that you don't accidentally poke yourself. Or if you prefer, it's a little bit easier but also a little bit riskier, you can use straight pins. You just want to be careful to try to not poke yourself because they're sharp and you might bleed. So we have our thread, we have our fabric pieces that are stuck together so they don't come apart. And with the whip stitch, you just go in near the edge, you poke your needle through, and here on the back side you see we've got our knot that doesn't poke through. And then we run the needle around, the thread and the needle around the outside. So you keep coming up from the bottom like this. So here I pulled it up, I'm going to come back around and poke it in through the bottom again. And we're going to just keep doing this all along this edge. And now this edge of these two pieces of fabric is stuck together. They're not going to be able to come apart. Now something else you'll notice is that my stitches are fairly close together. That way, when you try and say stuff your project, if you're going to do the stuffies, your insides don't come apart or your fabric doesn't pull apart. So here I'll show you what a longer stitch can do. Right here I'm going to make a very long stitch, and here I can stick my finger right through there, and stuffing can stick out through there too. So we want to try and keep them close together. So the whip stitch goes around the outside just from the bottom up every time. The running stitch, see now that my fabric's stuck together I can take out the needle. It's not going to go anywhere. The running stitch, it alternates. You go down and then you go up. And this one you maybe have done before in classes or with threading boards or that sort of thing. But this one goes back and forth, and instead of the thread going around the outside, it just goes along next to the outside. But either way, you're going to end up with two pieces of fabric that are stuck together. Just like this. Now, when you get to the end, you're going to tie another knot, or if your thread gets short and you're still working on it, you're still going to do the same thing. You're going to tie a knot, and it'll be just like the first one. But with this one, what you can do is stick your needle near there and tie your knot around the needle. Just loop it around the needle a couple times and then pull it out like this. And then if you stick your needle back in this loop like that while you pull it down, your knot will stay right next to the fabric. Or you can kind of just do it the other way. But here you see I've got a nice new knot right next to the fabric, and I cut it off and I'm done. So in this lesson we're going to learn how to sew on a button. Like in the last lesson where we were sewing a line, we need to start by tying a knot at the end of our string. Now I have a variety of buttons here, and just about any of them will work. This one has 4 holes, this one here has just 2 holes, but that's fine, either one will do. Now I have one button here that's not a great choice for this particular project. This button here has a thing in the back called a shank, which helps it stick out from the fabric. For this particular project, that's not a great button, but any of the rest of these will be fine. You can get buttons at craft stores and fabric stores, or if, with an adult's permission, you've got some old clothes with buttons that are worn out or otherwise not needed anymore, you can scavenge buttons off of old clothes. So, to sew on a button, you start by picking your button, and it's handy to mark the spot where you want to put it so that it's easy to remember, especially if you're choosing where to put your button earlier in your project. So then I will hold the button over top of the spot I want to put it on, and I'll like pinch it between my fingers on the fabric. Now this part's a little bit trickier just because you have to stick the needle in from the back side and you can't see what you're doing. So it usually takes me a couple tries to figure out where the buttonhole is. It's in there somewhere. Maybe right here. Nope. We'll try this other one. Oop, shoot. There we go. So now I have the first one, and it's going to be a lot easier after the first one. But that first one takes a little trying. So then you come up from the back side through the first hole, then you go back down through the next hole and the fabric. So now my button is attached to the fabric and I don't have to pinch it quite so carefully. But you want to go back, since this one has 4 holes, I'm going to come back and I'm going to go through the other pair of holes. And it's a lot easier to find those holes once you've got the first couple in. Like that. And I like to do this a couple of times because I want my buttons to stay put once they're there and never ever come off again. There we go. Now there are some other tricks for when you're sewing buttons on clothes and things, but I'm not going to show you those today. If you want to learn that kind of thing, you can ask an adult or find one of lots of different tutorials on the internet. So I've done all of my stitches, and then I'm going to tie a knot, and again this is the end knot, just like when you're sewing a line of a stitch. So I have it knotted on there. This button is not going to fall off. And I snip my thread and I am all set. I have a button stuck on that will never come off. In this class, we're going to learn how to make a superhero cuff. It's a bracelet or a cuff, rather like this one, that my son made last year. To be honest, I'm not sure what these symbols are, but he made them himself and he loves this. He puts it on and runs around and plays with this on and just really enjoys himself. So we're going to learn how to cut out a cuff and create a design to sew onto it, sew on a button and that will fit just right to go around your wrist, just like that. So, I have a handout here that will be attached to this class, and you might have some of these materials as part of a packet. If you don't, the handout goes through the material list of the things that you'll need to collect in order to make this project. So you start out with this pattern piece, and you'll need 2 pieces of fabric. I have felt here. You can use, for this project, denim. You can use fleece like this. This one's particularly fuzzy, but you don't need one that fuzzy. You can use a lot of the choices that I talked about earlier in the fabric choosing mini lesson. We'll be using those same techniques as we go through this. I'm not going to reteach you how to thread a needle. If you are wanting a little help with that, go back and look at that section again. So, what we need is the pattern and a couple of pieces of fabric. We need thread. You're going to need 1 button for this to hold the pattern, the cuff, shut around your wrist. You might want a couple safety pins in order to hold pieces of fabric together while you stitch them on so that they stay in the right spot while you're stitching. And you'll need a pair of scissors, and you need a pencil and paper in order to design your superhero symbol. I've decided to go with a heart for this particular cuff. You can do really anything you like. A couple ideas that I thought of were a lightning bolt or the hearts, flowers. You could do a shield or a cross. Really whatever you like. It should be about the right size to fit on this cuff though. It could stick out a little bit to the sides if you like. It's entirely up to you. You're making this. But if it's too big or too small, it'll be hard to stitch on and hard to stay in spot. So I'm going to quick, on my paper, draw up a little heart. And that will be the symbol on my cuff. And I'm going to do that in this red. I'm going to make the cuff out of the pink. So on the example sheet here, we have the material list and we have the instructions on how to do this. So you don't necessarily need to watch my video here. You could just follow the written instructions. And here's the pattern for the cuff. So what you want to do is cut this out from the paper. Just like that. And then cut out the shape of it. And then what we're going to do is safety pin this onto our fabric so that it stays in one spot while we're cutting it out. We don't want it to move around because then our shape will be funny. And I like to use safety pins because then you don't poke yourself with them while you're cutting out the fabric. There's one, and because this is long and skinny, I think two will be better. All right. So this is about the right size for most kids. If you're going to make one for an adult, you might need to make it a little bit longer. It just kind of depends on how big around your wrist is. And we'll make it more specific to your size when we decide where to put the buttonhole in a couple of minutes. So now I'm cutting around the pattern on the fabric. So I'm cutting it to the same shape and size as the pattern. There. All right. On the pattern, you'll see that I've marked where the button should go and where the buttonhole should go. We're going to sew on the button first and test the cuff on your own wrist to decide where exactly the buttonhole should go. So don't cut the buttonhole in yet. That'll be in the next steps. All right, so we have our pattern. Here's the cuff. And we're going to sew on the button next. The button goes about here. It's not real particular. You can put it anywhere over here, kind of near the end. All right, I'm gonna get a good length of thread here. Take out my needle. Okay. Tie a knot at the end, just like we did in the needle threading lesson earlier. Right. And then we're going to sew on the button, just like we did in the button lesson earlier. So if you need to go back to that to review, that's fine. You can just pop on over there and then come back to this part of the lesson when you're ready. Okay, so I have my button right there. I'm gonna sew it on. Alright, and I have my button on tight. It's never going to come off. Tie our knot on the back side. And cut that there. Now here, because we're each shaped a little different, I want to decide where the right place for the buttonhole is for me. So I'm going to put this around my wrist like this. And this would be easier with a friend or a parent. And I'm kind of looking right here is where the button is. This is a little bit loose, so I can get it on and off, but it's not too tight. So that's where I want my buttonhole to be, right on top of the button. And I'm going to try and mark that with the wrong hand here. There we go. Now, the size of your buttonhole depends on the size of your button. You want your buttonhole to be a little bit bigger, but not too much bigger. Because if it's a lot bigger, your button will fall right on out. So I've marked this, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to set it right here. And actually like that. And kind of mark what looks like it might be about the right size. I'm not going to cut all the way to those ends just yet though. I'm just going to cut a little piece of this and we'll see what happens. So what you're going to do is you're going to fold it in half. Fold your cup in half the long way. And right here where I marked where I want my buttonhole to be, I'm going to cut like this. Just like that. But not all the way in, just a little. Okay, so now I have a little cut here. It's obviously smaller than my button, but it's better to cut it a little bit small and then make it longer than to cut it too long right away. So now I'm going to make it a little bit longer. Okay, and I think that this is still not quite long enough. Nope, doesn't quite fit through that hole. You can test it and see. If it fits, you're good. If it doesn't fit, cut it a teeny bit longer. All right, there we go. All right, my button fits through my buttonhole. And so this one is just the right size for me. And it will fit just like that. All right. Now, so that's that part, and then here's the fun part, the decoration. And you can do whatever you want. You could stitch lines. You could cut long skinny lines on here. You can attach this however you like. So next we're going to add the design to our cuff. So I've already cut out my heart that I drew up earlier. I'm going to attach it with a safety pin to this piece of fabric that I've decided to put my heart on. And I'm going to cut it out following the pattern just like I did with the cuff. All right. So now I have this nice little red heart, and I'm going to choose to put it in the middle. I could put it anywhere I want, but this is where I want it. And I'm going to safety pin my heart onto the cuff so that when I sew them together, it doesn't move around or get out of place. It will stay exactly where I want it to be. Now I'm going to choose with this thread that I have earlier. It's long enough so that I can just keep using it for this next piece of the project. I'm going to tie a knot at the end, just like with the button before. And I'm going to use the running stitch and sew around the edge of the heart. You could use the whip stitch and do the same thing, or you could sew just in the middle like we did with the button. It's whatever you want to do. This is your project. So I'm stitching pretty near the edge, but not right at the edge, because then the stitch won't go through both pieces of fabric. You want it to go through both of them and to stay attached. So I'm just going in and out, and I'm going to go all the way around, just like that. All right, now I'm getting to the end. This is my last stitch. I want it to end on the back side, and I'm just going to tie another knot like I've done before with the button right there. I'm going to cut my thread, take off my safety pin, and there we go. I have my own superhero cuff bracelet. Just like that. So the neat thing with sewing is that you can do the same project as the person next to you and end up with something entirely different. Each project is unique to your material choices and what you choose to do, and that makes each one special. I hope you enjoyed this class today. Thank you for joining me.
Hi friends, I'm back. You know, I don't even know if I said my name yesterday, but anyways, for those of you who don't know me, I am Mandy Noble. My students call me Miss Noble, so since most of you are kids, it would be totally fine if you called me Miss Noble, or you can call me Miss Mandy, but that's my name, and I'm sorry I forgot to tell you that yesterday. So today, your message was that God is always with you, and it also says that He sees me through the storms of life. And hopefully you had a lot of fun with your lessons today. And I have a super fun video clip to show you that I think really explains how life can be and that there are ups and downs. And the message that I want you to remember as you're watching is that God's love is always with us during the good and the bad days. And we're going to have great days, and some days we're going to have bad days. And I bet all of you have had some bad days before. But the message of the video is that there are ups and downs, but that we can forgive each other and we can love each other. And that's exactly what God wants us to remember, and He wants to help us do. So I'm going to show you this fun video clip. And, okay. And hopefully you'll enjoy it as much as I do.
There's a lot that the kids need to know. A letter to a person on their first day here. Today, over 360,000 babies will be born, and you are one of them. Welcome, this is the world. It's a pretty cool place. There's lots to see, smell. There's corn dogs. I'm getting ahead of myself. There's just so much to do. Singing, dancing, and laughing. Laughing's the best. It's especially great when you laugh and milk comes out of your nose. But only if you just have milk. Otherwise, it's just gross. Some days gross things will happen. Some days awesome things will happen. Some days you'll get ice cream. Some days you won't. Some days your kite will fly high. Some days it gets stuck in the tree. It's just how it is here. There's plenty of reasons to dance. You just gotta look for them. Don't worry though, you won't be doing this alone. You're gonna meet lots of people here. Some of them will be really nice, and some won't be. It's not that they can't be, it's just, maybe they're just having a bad day. Being a person is hard sometimes. You should give people high fives just for getting out of bed. Oh, high fives! I forgot to explain that. How do I explain this? It's kind of, high fives are like hitting someone who is your friend. That's really bad. Just treat everybody like it's their birthday, even if they don't deserve it. Because we all mess up sometimes. The biggest mess up, not forgiving each other's mess ups. Maybe you'll be a teacher. Maybe you'll be president. Maybe you'll cure every disease ever. You might even see the Grand Canyon, swim in the ocean. Oh, this is so much. It's a lot. Try this. Take a breath. Isn't that amazing? It's called breathing. You're going to do it a lot. Nobody knows exactly how much. So enjoy it. Pay attention. Take brain pictures. Because amazing things will happen every day. You're going to do so much. But it's not about what you do. It's about who you are. You're awesome. You're made that way. You're made from love, to be loved, to spread love. Love is always loud, no matter what. Even if hate has a bullhorn, love is louder. So let your life be loud. Let's shout to the world. Things can be better. It's okay about all the mess ups. We're not true. Sorry, I'm just keep bringing that up. I don't think I told you this yet. We're really glad you're here. We don't say that enough to each other here because, well, life gets busy. You're going to be important and you're going to do a lot and you're going to smell great, but don't get too busy. Remember to let everybody know you're glad they're here. You don't have to remember all this right now. You're going to need a pep talk sometimes, and that's okay. Now, remember this. You're awake. You're awesome. Live like it.
All right. I just think that's such a good message. And I just want you to remember that God's love is bigger than any of those things that can happen that sometimes are sad or make our days difficult. He's always with us. So I'm just going to close with a short little prayer. You can pray with me if you'd like. God, please help me to remember that you are always with me. Your love is bigger than any of the problems I will face. Amen. Have a great night, and I will see you tomorrow.